Well, after Thursday night's scary situation in Miami, the Dolphins opted to place quarterback Tua Tagovailoa on injured reserve after suffering his third documented NFL concussion. Tua will have to miss a minimum of 4 games with the earliest eligibility to return coming in Week 8 as Miami hosts the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Week 2 was a rough stretch for a number of playmakers, including Chiefs running back Isaiah Pacheco, who's headed to the IR with a fractured fibula. Cooper Kupp, another IR candidate as the injury woes pile up for Rams receivers. And Deebo Samuel expected to miss multiple weeks after he suffered a calf injury on Sunday. Just a brutal second week of the season for a number of teams and their star players. Okay, maybe not to the same magnitude, but still a rough going looking ahead for a number of fantasy managers as well, as we welcome in CBS Sports fantasy sports writer Heath Cummings. And a lot of key pieces could be out for a significant period of time, and fantasy owners this week will be scouring the waiver wire to help fill some voids. But let's start at the quarterback position. This Tua news leaving some with a major hole on their roster. Who would you say is your top quarterback to claim?
I can't really believe I'm saying this, but it's Derek Carr. He has legitimately been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL the first 2 weeks of this NFL season, averaging more than 11 yards per pass attempt, playing so well, in fact, that he barely has to play in the second half because they're so far ahead. This Saints offense, and with new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak going very motion heavy, and the NFL defenses have not figured out how to stop it yet. Carr is a top 12 quarterback for me this week. He's available in more than half of CBS leagues. That will not be the case after Tuesday and Wednesday night. This guy should be rostered just about anywhere you're playing fantasy football.
And just considering the Saints in their first 2 outings scoring over 44 points in both of their outings. I know Alvin Kamara had himself a day, but also Derek Carr getting some things done with his arm as well for fantasy managers. But hey, Heath, it's a tough go for managers in probably the most important position of their lineups. We already had the Christian McCaffrey news last week, and now Isaiah Pacheco's headed to the IR, and Joe Mixon's another guy who could potentially miss some time. Who's someone owners maybe can grab as a placeholder option until their star ball carriers are back in the fold?
This one certainly got more complicated on Tuesday because the answer is Carson Steel. Carson Steel is going to get the first shot at carrying the rock for the Kansas City Chiefs. He will be their short yardage back. I think he'll be the early downs back. The rookie has really earned favor in Kansas City with a solid preseason. Did have a fumble last week. They didn't love that, but he's the first man up. The problem is they just signed Kareem Hunt, and they've got Samaje Perine. Now, Perine doesn't have a carry all season long. I think he's going to be just a passing downs back only. But the way I'm looking at it is I'd like to add all 3 Chiefs backs, but Carson Steel is the prize and someone you could spend upwards of 15% of your fab on. Really, you're just hoping he gets a touchdown, and the chances of that are decent on this Chiefs offense, especially since he has the short yardage role.
Hey, looking at some of those names, and especially considering Kareem Hunt being, signed to the team's practice squad, likely to be lifted to the active roster this week, do you see any value in maybe grabbing him as well and maybe stashing him, or do you maybe think you err on the side of caution heading into Week 3?
No, I definitely want to stash Kareem Hunt. I think he probably actually has the most upside of those running backs. It's just, listen, there's a reason that he was still available on the waiver wire, that he hadn't signed with anybody yet. This is a back that's maybe getting a little bit long on the tooth at this point in his career. We're not sure he's still the same guy. But if you'll remember, that rookie season from Kareem Hunt in Kansas City was pretty special. He's also good at catching passes. He's also good in short yardage. If Carson Steel fumbles early in this game in Week 3, we could see a situation where relatively quickly it's Kareem Hunt. But even if it takes a couple of weeks for Kareem Hunt to really, get involved in the offense, we're looking at a 6 to 8 week absence for Isaiah Pacheco. So I absolutely want to roster Hunt as well. I just wouldn't spend as much on him as Steele.
This is a selfish question that I'm going to ask you really briefly, but just considering the news with Isaiah Pacheco, any chance maybe, I don't know, Travis Kelce might see an uptick in some action?
I would expect that both Kelce and Rashee Rice would see an increase. Those short area targets, maybe even in the red zone, we see just a little bit more Xavier Worthy. But yeah, we're really hopeful. Listen, if you're just looking at the numbers as if Travis Kelce is nothing more than the numbers he's produced this year, and even the underlying stats, there's not a lot of reason for hope. He's now gone 5 consecutive regular season games without topping 50 receiving yards, the first time that's happened. But I do think that this will be a little boost for him. I'm starting Travis Kelce again this week.
Encouraging news for some of those fantasy owners that are waiting to see some production from their TE1. But all right, let's move on. I don't think any position has been more affected heading into week 3 than that wide receiver position. Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Deebo Samuel, and A.J. Brown among the names who suffered varying injuries over the weekend. Who's someone that might be available to be a plug-and-play player in a lineup?
It's Darnell Mooney. I was very impressed with him in week 2. He now has a 19% target share, which is good enough with his downfield profile. Leads the Atlanta Falcons in air yards targeted so far this season. That's not something Drake London fantasy managers were wanting to hear, but Mooney has a chance to be a really nice, high upside wide receiver 3. Not the kind of guy that's going to consistently give you 10 points every week, but he might give you 20 one week and then 2 the next. That's okay in your wide receiver 3 slot. Only rostered in 28% of CBS leagues. I expect that goes way up this week. Add him, plug him into the wide receiver 3, and hope you happen to hit the lottery that week.
Hey, Heath, I got a question for you, and this one, too, might be a selfish question that I have, but we talked earlier about the CMC news that happened ahead of week 1, and then this week we get that news about Deebo Samuel. What's the Niners going to do? Is there anything that I might want to keep my eyes on potentially that could be going out in Santa Clara?
I think the nice thing is for those people who already have Jordan Mason, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. I don't really expect Juwan Jennings or anyone else to get super involved in this offense, but I expect all 3 of those to benefit and end a big way. Brandon Ayuk's had a really slow start to this season. His target share should soar. And George Kittle, when Deebo Samuel has not been on the field over the last 2 years, has actually averaged 19.8 fantasy points per game. The tight end position has been a mega struggle at the start of the year. Kittle might just be the #1 tight end in fantasy for this season now that CMC's missing time and Deebo's missing time.
All right, so don't panic. Don't just go grabbing anybody. We think those guys that you already might have on your roster might be able to see an uptick in production. All right, let's wrap this combo up. Digging deep in the waiver wire. Who's a sleeper I could claim and maybe stash on my roster for, let's say, a rainy day?
Well, if you've been following fantasy football today for any time at all, you know that I love me some Gardner Minshew, and I was a little bit skeptical of him on the Raiders. He's off to a fantastic start, 2nd in the NFL in passing yards. That doesn't make any sense, but what does this year? He has Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers. They've both been sensational. The coach is letting him throw the football, and this week he faces a Carolina Panthers defense that has stopped absolutely no one the first 2 weeks of the season. And I'll tell you what, what I really love for this situation for Minshew is that Andy Dalton's taking over as the starter, because Andy Dalton's a professional NFL quarterback, something Bryce Young has not been to this point in his career. Andy Dalton's going to move the ball and put up some points for the Carolina Panthers. That will keep the Raiders offense needing to score. Minshew, I believe, could be a top 12 quarterback. If you miss out on Derek Carr on the waiver wire, that's okay. Go add Gardner Minshew. You can start him this week.
All right, Minshew averaging just over about 260 yards and guaranteed a touchdown over his last 2 games. Just a name to mention and remind yourself on the waiver wire. Heath, as always, thanks for helping me out and everyone else that might be struggling. And if you want more insight on how to dominate your league, check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast, where Heath is joined by Adam Azer, Dave Richard, and Jamie Eisenberg with the best insight on how to dominate your league. You can download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.